here we are, finally, in the new and improved and first episode worthy, real first episode worthy
Blanket Fort.
I have my best friend and my brother, Vinnie, in the Blanket Fort today.
Hello.
And we've been trying to sort of work on this show for a while now, me and Vinnie and a bunch of other friends. And we are going to get into it today and hopefully keep doing more.
Yeah.
So I kind of was just thinking, who are we? We're brothers from Wisconsin and Illinois. And I live in New Zealand.
I live in Austin, Texas.
I'm in Wellington. I've been living here for a little over 3 years. And Vin's been in Austin for...
On and off for close to 10 years. Yeah, even more than that. Yeah.
We are talking about some stuff today, particularly a few things we're really nerdy about. That's kind of the point of the show, is to bring people in who can have an interesting conversation about anything they've been nerding about recently, or in our case today, like first nerd type experience.
Yeah.
So why are we in a Blanket Fort? For me, it's because almost anything is cooler inside a Blanket Fort. And I think it really works on the digital level as far as bringing people together under a certain roof. And I think the internet's cool that way. And I think that's why this is a good idea for a show.
Right. So, yeah, and I just with the whole idea of like the Blanket Fort, we built a lot of forts growing up together.
Yeah, like one of my first memories is digging a sand trench in the playground at home.
Yeah.
And like digging a full on around the whole place at like 3 foot deep trench or something, like gutted the whole sandbox.
Yeah. Yeah, like the fort, I guess it's like, I mean, it becomes like this place where it's now your safe place, or just like you have ventured off into create your own zone to bring all of the things that you like into into this space.
Yeah, like, I always had things. I always had my stack of comic books. I always had a Game Boy probably, and like a book or a sketchbook or a notebook, and probably like D&D material at one point.
Yeah.
And then like snacks and soda and everything, and like action figures. I mean, it's definitely a good explanation for growing up and having to hide all your weird things you like, or, conform when you're in grade school and high school. And all you want to do is like hang out with your friends in your fort. Like even when I was living in my first apartment, I had a huge waterbed with 4 posts on it, and I converted it into like a full-time Blanket Fort.
That's pretty awesome.
It took up most of my room, and I hung a bunch of like metal hanger posters, like fabric posters, all around it, and blankets and stuff. And the TV was just in the center. And I was in this like perfect waterbed Blanket Fort for like a year. It was so ridiculous.
Which, by the way, waterbeds.
I mean, the one I got for free was pretty amazing. It was like, I would never own one again, but it was pretty sweet when I had one. It was beveled, so it wasn't a squishy mattress. It was like a real mattress, and it stayed at a comfortable 90 degrees all of the winter. And that was in Wisconsin, so it was a brutal winter outside, but every time I got home, I just jumped right into it. And it was like enclosed with my Blanket Fort stuff. Yeah. So I just sat there playing video games and watching TV and stuff in there. But when I had to move Jeff, our brother-in-law, and I and Julia, I think, had to rip it apart piece by piece because there was no way to disassemble it. And we had to rip open the waterbed mattress and drain it in the tub and then throw it all out through the window. It was pretty terrible. So, anyway.
Yeah. Here, I have a question. I'm going to pose a question. Have the forts or the fort mentality that we like kind of from our childhood almost like developed or evolved into the life spaces and like lifestyles that we have now?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of growing up and like building forts with everybody, and there was always like with our family being everybody living close, all our cousins and everything, there was always like play dates and days where we were all like bunched together and had to entertain ourselves. So like all of that, and then also living in the basement, having our rooms in the basement, an unfinished basement, and getting like that growing up for like the other end of it, like high school. And like that has totally the way I do things now, like the way I'm a slob with like my room usually, like I clean it now and then, but everything ends up in these piles and stacks and like this weird little system, and like recycling and using material like crates and boxes and stuff like you'd find in a basement, and like I collect cool things and keep them all in the same spot, and I take them with me, I always like bring things in my backpack like I'm going on a sleepover.
Right.
Like I don't pack like an adult most of the time.
Well, that's
I usually am like
now is like now when I go out, if I'm like going out to a party or to hang out with friends, I put my phone charger in my pocket. And that that and that's not so much like a fort thing, but that's just like a modern age thing where it feels like a kind of weird like sci-fi dystopia where it's like now I'm like I travel around with like a phone charger in my pocket.
Yeah.
Where it's just like what is like that is like so like it feels very like techie, kind of thing.
Oh, I mean like everybody has like bricks that they just plug into their phone as they walk, and that keeps them charged, and then like there's VR now, which is nuts, and like there's so many other things that are just totally crazy. But there is something about like I have built a fort in here a couple times, like makeshift, and there is very much something about like that gets rid of all that stuff. Like it like annihilates everything else, because it's like, no, this is like an old school way to hang out. And like I mean, I haven't done it recently, but like I'll probably bring a laptop in or something, but it's more fun to have like a stack of comics. I don't know. Anyway. They're the best, and I definitely think everybody should be building them. So what we've brought in today to the fort to talk about is we were kind of talking about your first real thing that you got obsessed with.
Yeah. Phantom of the Opera.
The Phantom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and maybe run through how you got introduced to it, I guess.
Okay, so it's funny, it's like one of those things where it's like I don't really know or remember exactly how I got into it. It probably coincided when like the Andrew Lloyd Webber like Broadway show got released. But for some reason, and I feel like I can definitely track it. More like on a like subconscious level, but I definitely related or connected to the Phantom of the Opera, and so I got super into it, and Mom and Dad took me to the first thing I went to was like a dinner theater performance of it.
Wow.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
And And like our parents were like really good about taking us to like live theater,
live stuff.
Like
yeah.
I feel like we got exposed to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, Nutcracker and Julius, she saw a lot of Cirque du Soleil, and we saw a lot of concerts and just theater in general.
So pretty young, probably. Yeah, it would have been somewhere between, I would say, kindergarten and, well, no, it was probably like third-ish grade or something like that. Got to go to a dinner performance of it. And it was like, it was like a circular stage. And so everyone is like sitting around. And so I was like with mom and dad, and we were like sitting like right up next to the stage and like seeing this performance. And it was very dramatic, And
yeah, it's like murder and romance and
the difference was that performance went with the storyline where the Phantom was like deformed from like an early age, and like saw his reflection in like the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of like went off it. And so like if anyone doesn't know like the kind of overarching storyline of the Phantom, I'll break it down for you. It's essentially you have this outcast man who is deformed and lives in like the sublevels of the opera house and falls in love with this young starlet and basically threatens the opera house to put her like into like the star role, and eventually kidnaps her to like bring her down into the cavernous like organ playing layer of the Phantom. And then from there, like it's a lot there. And like thinking about it, it's like, it's not, is that cool? Like,
I mean, the imagery and the, like, I don't know what was like your first way of seeing an ad or something for it, but like the imagery is very cool.
To the Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah. So if anybody listening hasn't heard like the overture for that 80s, it's like 87 that they wrote it or something. If you haven't heard that main track, it is so awesome. You need to go listen to it. And
it's a lot more synthy than I remember.
Yeah, which I love, which is so sweet.
Yeah.
Like, I love the marriage of like the classic mystery with this like 80s vibe that's just really, but it's not like radical 80s, it's just good sounding music. It's really cool. I was listening to a bit of the soundtrack before we started talking, and just like that first few chords are so huge and epic. I can't imagine seeing that live and like getting that feeling of just like that epic start to that whole show.
Yeah, our parents took me to the dinner theater performance, and I think like by then I was like pretty hooked. And then I think it was for a Christmas gift, our dad took me and our sister Raisa to the Chicago Opera House performance of like the Broadway show, which was like huge. And like where they actually crashed the chandelier from the ceiling of the opera house into, it was like awesome. And I was just like so into it.
It must have been mind blowing.
It was awesome. And like I think our dad, I don't know if he like slipped someone a 20 or something, but got to go like behind the stage and like see like all the costumes and meet the all the performers and like see like the trap doors and the way that they thing. It was pretty amazing to see that.
I don't think I knew that. I don't think I knew you guys got to see that.
Yeah, so that was like I think, just to like even just to go backstage, in the Chicago Opera House, which is an incredible space, and it especially because the storyline of the musical is taking place in an opera house, it just felt like you were there,
Yeah, and it must have been pretty surreal.
Yeah, as a kid, it was just so dreamy. It was just like,
yeah.
You're kind
of like Chicago at night as a kid is so enchanting. Like driving into the city is so crazy, and it was probably like winter or something.
It was winter time. Yeah.
Yeah. So like early, dark, cold night. Like that's like my favorite.
Yeah.
Driving.
Gotham
was like driving into the city.
Yeah.
And it was so cool and huge. It was just so big. And then getting to go see a show like that and being like taken away. That would have been so cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Other like just little like points with the Phantom is like there's like the point there's the Masquerade, which is also a really great musical moment.
Yeah, I saw a clip of the original show just before this.
But it's like where
real crazy.
You like the Phantom shows up with like the Red Death like mask.
Yeah.
It's so like striking.
Yeah.
I think that was the kind of imagery that I was really drawn to. Like I was like, whoa, what is this? Like there's something very spooky about it. Mm-hmm. And something that, like, because other musicals, like, most musicals are very lighthearted.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of, like, gothic kind of stuff.
Yeah, but, like, maybe it's because, like, you could almost, like, track, like, the Phantom of the Opera is, like, all right, you could, but there's something wrong with, there's like a psychosis that's happening with the Phantom, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's more fascinating. Like you don't really see a lot of musicals that are like dealing with, and I don't even know if they were like really dealing with that within the musical, or if it's just like they just went with like that storyline. But and maybe because it's like French and it's like that's very alluring and romantic as well. Like,
I think it said when I was reading that Andrew Lloyd Webber kind of picked pieces of the original and expanded a little bit on them to kind of carry those themes he wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also said that LaRue, who wrote it, he like defended that it was all true, pretty much, that he had based it off true stories he found out about until he was dead. Like, because he was a reporter and he became a writer, and he heard rumors about like all this stuff that happened at an opera house, and like he totally I guess it said he pretty much defended like his investigations and stuff until he died, that it was like a real haunting and all this stuff.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't do a lot of research or anything, but I just glanced at it. But yeah, so like the genesis of the story is really cool. It was printed in serials first and then made into a novel like the next year.
Yeah. And then I guess Universal made like the early version of it.
The old movie with Lon Chaney.
Yeah, which is super creepy.
Yeah, it's really creepy looking.
Yeah.
We had a copy of it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely jealous of you getting to see it at like the height pretty much of when it was happening, which is so crazy. I think the first, I never got to see it. I remember you guys going, and I remember you getting excited about it. And then I do think that a lot of the themes have carried over, obviously, in the popular entertainment and stuff. Like, I was talking about Darkman, which is a really cool movie by the Raimi brothers. Liam Neeson plays Darkman, and it's very much a Phantom-inspired kind of look and feel. And then I was just thinking Dr. Phibes with Vincent Price.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely like a sort of a modernish take on Phantom. And that's such a cool story. And then like you can see a lot of it in Batman for sure. Like between the capes and the swinging and the very dark themes and the shadows, and then like characters like Two-Face and like kind of a lot of themes that are, I think, probably people have been inspired by that, and probably other comic book stuff as well. Like I'm sure the whole idea has inspired a lot of comic book characters.
So yeah, I mean I think, and we can move forward, from Phantom from there. Well, one last like thing that I wanted to, I guess like touch on is like I think there's like and myself included, is like there's like a big sort of interest and infatuation with like true crime these days.
Yeah, I mean it's everywhere.
And I like the Phantom, like I was saying, is like that storyline, like it's not like it's definitely a story about someone who is very disturbed, and is acting out in a way like there's definitely I think it's like a early story of some kind of psychosis that's happening, which is rooted, in the fact that he is deformed. Yeah. And there's different storylines, like origin stories about how he's been deformed. I think like one is that he was like some kind of like chemist, and he got some kind of like acid burn on his face.
That's so crazy because that's Darkman. That's like that's what happens. It's cool to think of it as like an alternate time.
Right. And that's that's Joker as well,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like it doesn't stop. Yeah. And it's always the imagery of like the rafters and falling it from somewhere or swinging from somewhere, and that vertigo kind of camera shot, and like then like the big epic, I mean, especially with the 90s Batman show, it was like big soundtrack and big drama all the time, and it was very theatrical. Like you could see a lot of that being theater, like it could have been a theater show.
And then the other version, which was the version the first show I went to, was him as a kid who was already deformed, looking at his reflection in the water, which is more like the ancient Greek like Narcissus. It's almost like it's a weird,
like a bizarro Narcissus.
Bizarro, right? Yeah. Because Narcissus like looks so beautiful that it couldn't stop.
Yeah, a good name for a band.
So yeah, so it's like this obsession, and I think that anyone who's experienced a feeling in their life of insecurity with their own physical appearance can relate to that in a way where it's like you almost become feeling like an outsider because of your insecurities. And then like those insecurities, as we've seen, like I mean in a lot of different situations, can, if they're not healed or like worked through, can build into a very obsessive and potentially dangerous thing. Yeah. Where like people who feel like there's no way other than me kidnapping the opera singer and dragging her down into my layer of darkness, where I'm going to keep her captive and play my organ music for her, like that's like, that it's like, well, what is that? I think it's maybe an allegory for that kind of psychosis,
Yeah,
And so that's to me, that's really fascinating. It's like, because it's like telling that story, which, we can see a lot, like the whole like incel like culture.
Yeah.
Like guys who like think that there's like
they deserve this stuff.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And that's a whole other like thing, but like
but you're right. Yeah.
Maybe that was like an early story about, I think it's essentially a story about a man's insecurity about himself.
Yeah. And at the time, that would have been, probably pretty frowned upon, even to just be an insecure guy. Because, like, you were expected to do a lot and to do a lot of it young. But I'd like to learn more about it and actually read the book. I've never read it. I've probably tried to read it before when I was a kid. But I'd like to do it and learn more about the author and kind of do more connections to other things it's inspired. So do you think it inspired you in any kind of art or style, or, made you get interested in other things?
I'm sure that it has. I think just seeing, so me and 3 of my closest friends just the other night went to the ballet.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. Like, we got to go to the ballet. We got free tickets and we all dressed up and like went to the ballet. And like just being in the theater, I think
it's so
there's
fun.
There's something about being in that space that is.
Yeah, it's like you're all getting that special show, which is really cool. Like, there's this select amount of people that get to see this thing.
Yeah.
And every time it's real. It's like, it's not a recording, and it could be different any night. They do the same show, but something could change. And I think that is really like it's magic. It's really magic when you're in theater and it's good theater. Like anytime I go, I love it. I get so excited when we see anything live. And luckily we live like in the middle of this city that has so many live shows all the time, like all year. And like we just got some tickets to this Irish comedian, Dylan Murren from Black Books. It's a very funny show, and he's coming around to do some stand-up. And, in Shaun of the Dead, the boyfriend with glasses who gets ripped apart and pulled through the window, that's him. So
awesome.
We're going to see his show in October. So that'll be really cool. But we've seen things more on serious notes like Phantom, like musicals or sort of Cirque du Soleil kind of show, and all kinds of things that are, you just really get suspension of disbelief and forget what's going on outside for like 3 hours. It's so cool.
Like for me, just being in that space of like this giant theater, especially like if you're in a theater that just is like feels like, well, it's like 100 years old.
Yeah, there's some old ones here, and they're pretty amazing.
About that just intrinsically feels like there's it's very dreamy, but it also just feels like very like now I'm gonna hyper focus on this performance, and the curtain, like my favorite thing is when the orchestra first like tunes their instrument.
Yeah.
And it's just that the first one goes,
the wall of sound,
they all tune, together, and then they've tuned, and then it's like, okay. Like, and then
it's gonna start.
It's like, I don't know if I've like everything else beyond that, like it's fine. But like that moment, like that's kind of what I live for. It's when they tune.
Because it's like it's like that one conductor has just like got everybody in the room. Like at that one moment, it's like everybody's focused on that silence right then.
Yeah.
And then like it's all about to change. But yeah, you're right. It's like there's something really permanent about that, like that moment right there.
Yeah.
That really connects all of that, like all of the shows, but like especially for that a musical that you're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
really cool. Yeah.
went and saw Giselle, a ballet,
Mm-hmm.
and that was so it's based on, and I don't know if you want to talk about anything
Go
else.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we saw Giselle. It's based on this German folklore of a young girl who has been courted by a man who turns out has been basically uh, with another woman and
Mm-hmm.
has like committed himself to engaged to another woman. And so when she finds out, like the thing is about Giselle is that she has like this heart condition where if she gets too excited, she is gonna die. And
Okay.
so she basically dances herself
To death.
to death.
Oh
And
man.
so her when she dies, her spirit
Spoiler alert.
what's sorry, spoilers. Giselle
Any
dies.
Giselle? Any people going to
Yeah.
see Giselle?
Anyone who's from the
Hopefully, we have a cultured listener
yeah.
audience fan
So
base. So
she goes into she goes to the enchanted forest with the willies, which the willies are the spirits of women who are enraged and have
okay.
been done wrong by men
Okay.
in their lives, and so they lure men into the enchanted forest to dance them to death.
Wow.
Yeah,
So it sounds like a pretty sweet show. I'm sure it was pretty intense.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
awesome.
Ballet's great. We grew up going to a lot of shows because our younger sister and Raisa for a little while did dance. Julia still does lots of dance, and Raisa's kids do dance, and Julia's kids do dance. But so yeah, we saw a lot of that growing up, going through high school and everything, and supporting our sisters. But since we've moved here to New Zealand, I've actually gone to the ballet a few times now. For the first time, really, I don't. Maybe I saw Nutcracker a long time ago, and probably a couple other things. I think I saw Julia did costumes for a production of Romeo and Juliet, and I think I saw that. And I think it was, or maybe there was no ballet. I don't think that was ballet. So anyway, here in Wellington, I've seen The Wizard of Oz put on it by the New Zealand Royal Ballet, and
Dark Side of the Moon, dude. Just played on the third roar.
It's true.
Does play out good.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I have tried it. I have synced it up before in high school. And that was an amazing show. The guy playing Scarecrow was so good because everybody was doing this super tight ballet stuff that was all coordinated, and he'd be doing the same moves, but he'd be really loose and flopping around like the Scarecrow would. And he'd be falling over himself and contorting, and he was really amazing. And then he'd like snap back up and grab Dorothy. It was like a really, really cool performance. And then the whole time, the stage had these walls, and they would just open and other characters would come out, and then like it would close and it was these magic door kind of things. It was so cool. The costumes were great. And then I saw with Natalie again, we went and saw Romeo and Juliet at the ballet, and that was great. But you kind of know the whole story. So it was like entertaining, but it got to a point where you were kind of like, okay, it's kind of dragging on a little bit because there's no dialogue.
And like just being in that theater space, like for me, like I like so much enjoy watching the show, but there's something about just like being in that theater space where like even if I'm like drifting off, like because when we went to the ballet, like I had worked, all that I was like tired. And I was just kind of like, there's like moments
sitting there,
and there've been moments where I've like gone to see the symphony and I'm like drifting off to sleep, and it's like, this is the best place to drift off and fall.
Yeah, totally.
Like, there's something about the space of it that really just feels.
The symphony is so cool. Because I remember going to see the Chicago Symphony a few times for the free show.
Yeah.
Like we went with the Harper kids, and then I went with Mom and the Addisons once, and that is such a cool theater and such an amazing show. And like, that was great. Music like that, like live orchestra stuff like that. I mean, so I think we were really lucky to grow up getting exposed to going out and seeing the arts, and then being able to afford to keep going and on our own and see things. I mean, and then there's also just going to concerts and stuff, which is like a whole other thing. But like getting to go and sit down and support a show and support actors or dancers or whoever is so cool, because they're always so thankful at the end of the show. I think like whenever you go to something like that and you sit through the whole thing, and I think when you like get to hear from them, it's really cool when they talk to the audience at the end, maybe, or it's really special, I think, to be able to do that. And it gets expensive to do some of it, but then there's like super cheap theater and everything too. And then I think it also pushes you to want to maybe do a little more or something, like,
when I was at the ballet, I was like looking at the stage, I was like, what would I do with the stage?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have a few ideas that I've always joked around in my head, but I actually started like trying to plot one out on paper the other day, and I was like, oh, this could actually be pretty entertaining. And I mean, it's so cool to get to be in charge of what everybody's seeing and like tell that story and get everybody for like 2 hours or whatever. I think it's really power, and like people don't always see it that way, but I think it's like that's power, is like someone bought a ticket to see whatever you're going to show them, and like sometimes it's amazing. So maybe the last one I want to touch on as far as recent things I've seen. Bill Murray did this tour and made an album and did this show. Right. That's really amazing. It's really cool. And it's so different from what you'd expect from him normally, I think. And it's like mostly classical music, or it's like piano, cello, and violin. And then he does spoken word and sings a little bit, and they do a little bit of like stage stuff, and there's a few gags and stuff, but it was so cool. And we got real close to the stage when we watched it, and like the whole show was amazing. It was really like, it's always really crazy to see somebody like a celebrity that you really like, but like that was pretty much on another level of seeing somebody that we were that close to, somebody that awesome and talented. And then everybody else on stage too, like the musicians were amazing. And it's just 4 of them all together. But at one point he came over to the other side of the stage, kind of closer to where I was sitting, and he sat down and did like a big reading from Tom Sawyer. And he did the whole scene, the river scene with Jim and Huck, and it was like all scored by the band behind him. It was really intense and really cool. And he was sitting there in this chair, just kind of like staring in our direction at one point. It was just like chilling almost, but it was really like losing all other distractions at that point, and getting like so sucked in, and then like leaving the theater at the end of the night just feeling like so exhilarated, being like, oh wow, I can't believe that. And like so many people are never going to see that show or know what that, that whole, everybody kind of knew some of what each little act was, but seeing it all out, laid out that way, and with the music and their interpretation of it, and then like leaving and reflecting on it, it was so cool. And, just a really cool experiment. And I think there's like some other things like that I'd like to see. We saw a film about the Silk Road Orchestra, which is really cool. And that's Yo-Yo Ma and a bunch of his friends doing some really crazy music. It's all people from different countries playing instruments together. Mm-hmm. And you should look into that. That's really cool. You would love that. There's like a documentary about it, but there's a bunch of performances online. So anyway, maybe next time we can kind of talk more about different live stuff or other things we have done, like performances.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just with that, I think that like with the Bill Murray performance, and it makes me, it brings up feelings of what it is to be a performer, or not just to be a performer, but to be compelled to create and to share.
Yeah, and to share.
And that there's something like within, I think, everyone that wants to express themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think like within, for myself personally, I think we all do our best to uphold hopefully we all, do our best to uphold a quality of life.
Yeah.
So you can just be okay, when you're being fed and care of one another. But then, that you also have the opportunity and to create and not just create, but to perform and to shine in that way with people. And I think with those of us who are compelled to do that, it can be challenging to maybe this is speaking very personally, but just like to work and to kind of go through the day-to-day life of putting food on my table and paying the bills and everything, but also reaching and for those kind of expressions that you see with people who have maybe your role models or something, that have by some grace been able to be elevated into a space of being able to just to shine in that way, mm-hmm. and to perform. And I guess what I've seen is it takes a lot of persistence.
Yeah.
Where you just keep doing what you love to do, and the only reason you do it is because you love to do it, and that's the thing in life that makes you happy. Like that's the thing that makes you most satisfied, is just doing it, but it's also sharing it.
Yeah. And not keeping it to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be lazy. It's hard to be creating. It's always hard, I think, on some level. Maybe not for everybody, but I think like over time, like trying to do things, trying to like create new things can definitely feel like a lot more work than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not making money doing it.
Right.
And you're just like, even if it's more of a hobby, it's like it's still hard to push yourself and then to share it. Like it took a long time for me to share most of any like writing I did with almost anybody.
Yeah.
Because it was so like such a wall up around that stuff.
Right.
But the more you do it, the better you feel, and like you get real responses from people, and that's what the whole point is anyway. And like you learn how to fix things, or to see things the way other people see them. It's really, and then it goes into like that cycle of telling more stories and sharing, and then hopefully other people getting inspired by them. And I think that's why I love playing D&D so much, because I get to sort of be that spotlight of entertainment for, a couple hours, and people are really a part of that. Hopefully the game is like entertaining enough that everybody feels like they're really contributing to it and they're a part of it. And then a lot of people walk away wanting to run their own game, which is like the whole point of it, and spreading it to like bigger groups of people. And now it's just so crazy how popular. We'll probably talk about that next time.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about D&D next time.
Totally.
So final thoughts on Phantom of the Opera? Maybe favorite scene?
Definitely the masquerade scene. I think that's the one that's probably the most striking to me. I think that's probably like, the mask of the Red Death. I think the skeleton mask, there's something about that really was so just hit me in a way. I also just the overall psyche complex of the Phantom. I think
it was in a one-dimensional character. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
He had a lot under the surface, and I mean, there's a real person under that character, and
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to be learned from that story. Especially we kind of touched on it, but I think especially in this day and age, there's a lot of like, it's never been my thing to like subscribe to like online dating or stuff like that. But I think like relationship wise, like people who are trying to connect with other people, and particularly folks who have any kind of insecurities about themselves, whether it's like physical or internal. I think it's very important that they feel like that they can be just like lovingly received in life. And I think the Phantom of the Opera is an allegory for it's a tragedy for like the way that what the heart desires, and the extremes that one would go to in order to try to find connection with someone.
Yeah.
Through even their most like highest passions.
I think rejection is a big part of the story, and whether or not you're going to deal with it in a positive or negative way.
Yeah.
And so many people, like you said, need to learn from that if they're going to be, being in the real world. You get rejected so much, or, just in conversation or whatever, like little rejections, everything. And a lot of people can't handle it or don't know how to respond to it. And
that's like just
entertainment that can teach you those kind of concepts is so great. Because you're picking it up and not even thinking about it, and seeing, I think I've picked up a lot over the years from just everything I've consumed. Obviously, everybody does, I think. But like I think a lot of my appreciation for things like music and the theater and people's art in general comes from like really a lot of it comes from growing up and watching like Looney Tunes because it had the symphony happening.
Yeah.
And
totally.
for me, it was like, it was just this mix. It was like, here's this totally silly thing, but it's scored by this amazing, it's in the background. There's this like real art that's happening in the background, and you're seeing it all at once. And it's like making the silly thing make sense because it's got this music. Like without the music there, or if it was goofy, like it made so much more sense because it was this dramatic music.
Yeah.
And then teaching me these concepts about like rising action and like just like the way that music is composed and how to predict things in a story, like everything. It taught me so much about every story, and then really just like made me want to hear more of that kind of music, and then listen to that music on my own without it, just buying like classic music, and then like going to see symphonies, and then understanding the music in a live show like a theater, and listening to the music while you're watching it, and being able to like predict things in your head and stuff like that, and you're just like, oh man, something's happening.
When I get like the Barber of Seville, like I like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. And like so yeah, I think it's just so cool that people making those things care enough to try and like embed these important lessons into them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to do it. Like it could have just been,
right,
crap, and probably still could have sold it. But they took it so seriously. Like that's why I love being obsessed with cartoons and people thinking it's funny or whatever. Because it's like nobody realizes how seriously everybody making the cartoons takes it. Like the level of detail that goes into animated shows and like work and teamwork that goes into it, and like people making these things happen and these visions, and then like people think it's weird when you know a lot about like voice actors or people who animate, are like, oh yeah, well that guy worked on this back then, and that's why this looks this way or whatever, and like and like there's such a huge influence, like it's all kids watch most of the time. So like there's that whole generation of us that grew up watching like Ren and Stimpy and all those awesome 90s cartoons that were happening, and it obviously influenced so much like pop art and everything that's happening now too, like, and then Adult Swim and everything, like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
it's just wild. So thanks for hanging in the Blake Fort with us, everybody, and learning a little bit about the Phantom and about Vin's Phantom experience.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about it. It's funny because it definitely was, I think, a pretty integral part of my early childhood. As far as like, it definitely, I'm sure that it influenced my perspectives, or just like engaged.
Plus, you have that whole back piece Phantom of the Opera tattoo.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there is the huge back piece tattoo that I can't. That's permanent. So
it's actually just a portrait of Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's not even imagery from Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. So there's that. But it's fun that there are these. We don't really get to choose what it is that inspires us or that we link into, and maybe that's sort of at the core of our like talking about like our fascinations and things. We don't really get to choose. There,
I think you learn to be open to what's coming your way, and that's how you are able to get into it more and learn more about it. The more things you say yes to being in, checking out, the cooler all your ideas end up being.
Yeah.
And as long as they're safe things that you're checking out,
exactly.
As long as they're not, off the charts. But yeah, like, and who cares if nobody knows what you're talking about when you mention them, because then you can show it to them. Like, I think one of the people that I try to share with a lot of other people is like Mobius. I love showing people Mobius artwork and being like, yeah, like this dude influenced so much, and so many people don't talk about him. I mean, he's famous. He's famous, but a lot of people don't know who he is, and like his artwork's just so amazing. And then getting to share that with people once they get into it, like anything, like music or food or whatever. But you got to be open. That's the lesson on Blanket Fort today.
Mm-hmm.
Be open to everything, because it's going to make you cooler, as long as you don't use it negatively.
Exactly. Yeah. Keep an even keel and allow, like, be open to those inspirations, and also follow your gut. As long as like follow your heart and your gut. Like, it's
have people around who you can trust, who can show you, who can guide you if you don't know what your gut's telling you. That's also important.
Yeah.
And being able to ask people, what do I do? Man, sweet. I think that kind of wraps it up for this episode of Chilling in the Fort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is good.
So sweet.
Yeah.
Let's
yeah.
Yeah,
it was a good time in here in the fort.
Yeah, man. So it's time for me to eat some of the chili I made yesterday, and I will be doing that out of the fort because I don't want to contaminate the air supply.
All right.
I will be farting later.
Definitely.
So zip it up, zip it down.
Is that the catchphrase?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably go with that at first. We'll see if we get a good response on that one.
Yeah. Zip it up and zip it down.
Yeah. All right, man. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll probably put in some really sweet outro music right here. Potentially something that sounds like the Phantom of the Opera that I don't have to pay for. Yeah. If you had a one line that you could get in, if they were like, Vinny, we're gonna add a line in the Phantom of the Opera and you get to do it, what would you have?
Yeah. Oh, if I did?
Yeah, that'll be the final line of the show. Like it ends and then you get to add a and you say something.
Okay. Oh wait, say it again.
You get to add a bit of story to the end of the Phantom of the Opera. Like it all closes and then you get the last line.
It closes and
you gotta say it dramatically.
And Christine, you also got really good titties.
Bum, 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 bum. And then the curtain closes.